Please welcome your host for this evening, Dr. Lindsay Hoffman.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here, and for those of you who are watching online. This is the final event of our 11th annual National Agenda Speaker Series. It's hard to believe. We're here thanks to the University of Delaware's Center for Political Communication, with support from the Office of the Provost, the College of Arts and Sciences, and the Division for Student Life. This year's theme, Reflecting America, as we look into the metaphorical mirror, think about that. As Americans, as we look into the mirror, what and who do we see here in 2021? How are political polarization, social movements, economic upheavals, not to mention a global pandemic, redefining who we are as Americans? We find ourselves in increasingly narrow echo chambers with access to more information than ever before, but it seems like we can't even agree on basic facts, much less listen to different viewpoints. But that's what we do here at National Agenda. We learn from each other how to communicate effectively across differences, how to disagree without being disagreeable, and how to turn talk into action. We've already heard from some amazing speakers this season. David Joy, an Appalachian novelist from North Carolina, with Asma Khalid, a Muslim journalist who covers the White House for NPR. Two friends since middle school, Bernie Jacques and Justin Pierre, who are sons of Haitian immigrants who are friends but have found themselves on complete opposite ends of the ideological spectrum. Eric Michael Garcia, who spoke to us from the perspective of a person on the autism spectrum, about what it's like to be on the autism spectrum and engage with others as a journalist. And Sarah McBride was our most recent speaker, who is the first openly state transgender senator in America's history. We will be inviting your participation tonight, both here in the audience and online. To ask a question here in the theater, you'll see there are two microphones set up. I'm just checking that they're there. And when I open it up for Q&A, you're just going to raise your hand. I'll have two of my students who will help escort you to the microphone and back to your seat. Please keep your mask on. To submit a question online, just type your question into the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom window, and it may be selected as part of our Q&A. So tonight, Nikkolas Smith, a native of Houston, Texas, is a self-described artivist, activist, and artist, a children's book author, and a Hollywood film illustrator. As an illustrator of color, Nikkolas is focused on creating captivating art that can spark important conversations around social justice in today's world and inspire meaningful change. Many of his viral sketches are included in his book, Sunday Sketch, The Art of Nikkolas. His works have been featured in Time Magazine, the New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN, Buzzfeed, and many more. And he's also the illustrator of the book, just released yesterday, the 1619 Project, Born on the Water, a new picture book written by Nikole Hannah-Jones and Renée Watson. Signed copies will be available in the lobby for purchase after tonight's talk. We have a great presentation scheduled. You're going to see lots of Nikkolas's art. It's very exciting. I'm excited to bring him here. Please join me in giving a big blue hen welcome to Nikkolas Smith.
How's everybody doing? Thank you for having me. I am very appreciative. I would like to kind of give you guys just a little rundown on the power of art. Art is very powerful, as we know. This is me. This is me as a child, and I'm going to talk a little bit from the very beginning when I was just making art of myself and all of these interesting things that would ever come to mind, I would make art. I was talking to the students a little bit earlier about the art that I made when I was young. I didn't really fill up books with art because I was afraid of it being perfect. So I just want to start by telling everybody, you are all creative. Don't worry about if the art that you might make is not perfect. Just make art. Everybody can make art. I do artist therapy, and I will talk about that in a second. So once I went to college, Hampton University, a little bit south of here, I studied architecture. I found out about a company called Walt Disney Imagineering, and I became a Disney Imagineer for 11 years, designing theme parks. And at the same time, I realized that I did not want to be an architect because I realized that art is my passion, and art is what I should be doing all the time. And so I decided, you know what, I'm going to become a full-time artist. I now do concept art, still for Disney sometimes. I write and illustrate children's books. I have a new book called Born on the Water that I will talk to you about later. I create movie posters. I do concept art for films. Judas and the Black Messiah and Space Jam are two of my recent ones. And I'll just say real quickly concerning Space Jam, like, this was the type of thing where in all concept art that I do for films, I have a script with just words, and somebody says, can you add visuals to this? Can you explain visually what would it look like if LeBron James got sucked into a computer and then met cartoon characters in an animated world? So things like that, I do a lot of that, and that's part of what I just feel like the importance of concept art is just trying to visualize what's not there. So I do that a lot. Another thing, I teach traditional art. I teach digital art. I have a Skillshare class, if you want to check that out. Really just about the power of artivism and what artivism actually is. Part of that, in essence, has to do with last summer, which was insane, if you remember. There was a pandemic. There was a national protest regarding Black Lives Matter. At one point, Converse reached out to me and asked me to put my art on billboards all over Los Angeles, and I said yes. And that was just an unbelievable moment where I could have people actually almost walk a city walk through my Instagram, explaining to people who I am as a Black artist, why it's important to recognize that Black lives should be recognized as important. Things that I did not ever think that I would have to explain, but here we are, you know. Another thing I do is I make art about the world, this world that is broken, that needs to be fixed, all the broken bones of the world that need to be fixed. This is Watts. And Watts, there are parts that need to be developed. And one of the things I try to do with the young folks there is just explain to them that through concept art, you know, you can actually envision what you want to see. There's so many things with art that, you know, there's so many broken things that you wish were working better. And visually, we can say, okay, well, maybe you guys can grow your own vegetables. Maybe you guys can have your own tech stations that explain to you all the lessons that you aren't learning in school that you should be learning. Also, this place right here is literally 10 minutes away from SpaceX. And I was going to a SpaceX tour one day after leaving this place, and I realized there should be busloads of kids going to SpaceX. Why is there a disconnect there? And so some of the art is also, some of the art that I make is just showing these kids you could be in space one day. I mean, there's literally a Black man floating in space right now. That guy on the bottom right is floating in space right now. Just creating visuals to show young folks and the generations coming up that you can do incredible things. And sometimes it's just a matter of getting them to see themselves, you know, even if it's just through art, getting them to see themselves in a manner that they haven't seen and opening their eyes to what's possible. A lot of times in presentations, I like to say that, as you may notice, I'm a Black man. The reason I was born in America and say not Central West Africa is because many, many years ago, European colonizers were very afraid of the people that they came in contact with. and they enslaved them, and American slavery happened for 250 years. And then segregation happened for 90 years after that. And then there's this little green portion where we've been trying to undo all that crazy stuff that happened before that. And so that's part of the reason why I do artivism. It's essentially art and activism. And like I said, it's like finding that broken bone. Like, what is happening in this world that you wish you could climb the highest mountain and tell everybody, this is not working right. How can I fix this? And so that's what I try to do. I try to inspire people to make a positive change and fix that broken bone after they see the art that I've created. And it really was all based off of Nina Simone's quote that says, it's an artist's duty to reflect the times. Like, I could not, I was literally working at Disney, some weekends I would make, art about roller coasters and churros and Disneyland, and at the same time, all these crazy things were happening. If you turn on the news, it was like, there were so many things that you just could not ignore, and I was like, I need to make some art that reflects what's happening. At the same time, this was, I would say, years ago, 2010, I was going through a divorce. It was the hardest time of my life, and I really just used art as therapy to get myself out of that low point. And I said, I'm gonna make one art piece every Sunday, and I'm just gonna post it on the internet. And it really turned into my Sunday sketch series, and it's been 8 years of, making art like week after week. I have every topic that I could think of. There is mass incarceration, immigration, there is mass shooting tragedies, community outreach, suicide prevention, wildlife conservation, environmentalism, racial injustice, which is one of the biggest topics that I touch because it is so close to me, and it's one of the biggest broken bones in America. It's one of the things that we don't really talk about in this country as much as we should, and some things that are just as simple as, this is my great grandparents, my great grandma, grandpa. I want people to be able to see them as human beings. This is kind of a depiction of, what might they have felt like on Juneteenth when, in Galveston, Texas, and they found out that they don't have to be enslaved anymore, that this country will no longer recognize them as 3/5 human, but 5/5 human. Like, the joy that they might have felt. Like, a lot of the, I would say, basically the portraits, like, I do a lot of portraits, and I want them to be looking at you directly in the face so that you can see their humanity, so that you can see, for a second, just like to put you in their shoes, to say, these are humans, these are people who are struggling with very real issues, and why can't we all just understand that in some way we're all the same, and that we should all really be rooting for each other rather than tearing each other apart. Now, I don't know why this type of thing can be misconstrued as divisive and tearing people apart when it's all about bringing people together, but we'll get into that later. Global health, last year, the pandemic, we all saw, there are so many points, and people ask me a lot of times, like, are you ever like unsure of what to make this week for your Sunday sketch? And I'm like, there's just so many things. Like, I can open up Twitter and find something new every week that, like, how can this be happening? How can we be in a pandemic and there's nurses in New York who have to use trash bags, and we're the greatest nation in the country? How can we have a guy named Jesus in the middle here who's in Houston, Texas, who's an essential worker under threat of deportation when this is the only country that he's ever known, and he's a DACA recipient? All these types of things where, the art that I create, I just want it to open people's eyes in that way and ask those questions, like, why does it have to be this way? I also like to create superheroes. Superheroes are one of my favorite things to do, but on my end, I feel like I need to create superheroes of people who you don't get talked about a whole lot. So this is Robert Smalls. He was born enslaved in 1839. He stole a Confederate ship. He disguised himself as a captain, used secret hand signals to pass Confederate ships, and he rescued more enslaved people. He escaped to freedom, and then he ran for Congress, and he became a congressman. Like, this is real life. This actually happened. And I'm like, why didn't I learn about things like this? Like, I definitely remember learning about Davy Crockett and the Alamo. I grew up in Texas. I learned about the Alamo. I learned about this guy. I feel like I should have learned about this guy before that other guy. But things like that we'll get into in a second. Chadwick Boseman, another favorite superhero of mine. I had the opportunity to work on Black Panther, the sequel, and also be on set for the first film. And just this guy's heart for people was something that it was incredible, and it was such a shock when he passed. And I just wanted to create something to kind of extend his legacy, and this ended up being, one of my most famous pieces because I feel like it just touched people and was a reminder of like the huge heart that he had. I'm very grateful that, they were able to display it in Disneyland for a while, and now it's at Children's Hospital Los Angeles, which I'm very happy about. I was talking to some kids in Atlanta through Zoom the other day about my new book, and I was telling them, well, for one, this kid who's reading a book is a superhero to me. It's amazing to see how many young kids are able to learn so quickly and understand what's going on in the world. And so for us today to have any kind of conversation to say that kids are too young to understand race or what's going on, I mean, as for me, growing up in Texas as a Black man, like as a little Black child, like I was given lessons about race that no kid should have. Like, kids of color are taught about race very early, and it's usually not a friendly lesson. And so we had some good talks the other day, and kids are amazing and smart. And so I'm really, really excited that I was able to be a part of this project, Born on the Water 1619 project. It is, I feel like, one of the most important broken bones that we have in this country, and something that we deal with constantly. And until we actually have that deep conversation about how this country was formed, we're never gonna really go anywhere. It's gonna keep being conflict and issues and all the things that you see right now. So I will show a few slides from the book. These are some of my favorite. A lot of what I was happy to do was be able to depict what was life like before the whips and chains and before American slavery ever even happened. There was so much joy in the kingdom of Ndongo. There were amazing cultures, amazing people who were ripped from Central West Africa, and there were not slaves that were taken from Central West Africa. They were ingenious engineers. They were people who knew how to work the land. They were incredible people. And the reason that they were stolen was because they were, so good at doing so many things. And so it goes into all of that in the book, and I can't wait for y'all to check it out. This is one of my favorite spreads, which is And They Dance, and there's so much joy in that. And one of the things that Nikole and I were talking about was you have to understand how much joy was in these cultures. You have to understand how much, just for centuries, the craftsmanship and the ingenuity and everything that was infused in all of these people to understand how devastating it was that they were taken. And it was very tragic, and it became, a huge task for me to turn it into visualize what that was like and make it a book that kids will be able to digest. So it is heavy, but it takes you through all of that, and then after that moment, it takes you into the resistance and just everything that went into what it took year after year to fight and get your freedom back. It was a lot, and after that point, you get into, the legacy, the amazing people that were born from this moment, the poets and the activists and the doctors and the preachers and all of these people that came from that moment. And it really it's a miraculous thing that it even happened. But it's just another great thing to be able to illustrate that point. What I want to get into really quickly is some of the research that I did, just to be able to infuse this book with so much culture. A lot of it, I really wanted to pull from the African practice of scarification. There's so many stories that can be told, and a lot of those stories are actually told right on the faces of Africans and, tribes like Fra and the Nuer and Surma tribe, where they might have these like parallel, diagonal scars that explain where they came from or where they are or what type of person they are. There might be wavy patterns. There might be all these different like dotted patterns, all these things. And I wanted to kind of, even before you get into the book, really just like take that idea and tell the story of the book. And these are the end papers at the beginning and end of the book. And it's one of my favorite parts because it is the story of the book. There are motifs in the book that have to do with life, death, and rebirth. And life on the left, death, rebirth. And I just wanted to kind of try to visually explain to, especially young folks, to explain like, what is that symbol that you might look for at any point in the book if you see any markings that show kind of like a unified front, where the symbol here on the left side, like a unified symbol of, people working together, no lines being crossed, just unity. Like, what would that look like, and how can I incorporate that into all the people? What does it look like in the middle there? What does it look like to be, double crossed? What does it look like to have a solid line of culture that's been going for generations, and then another line just coming right through it, like to be taken, like everything that just be destroyed in one motion. And there's a lot of that. You'll see slave ship at the top, some people on it. You see Africa on the left side. Days and days of just marking the days that you might see at the bottom. And then, what is it like on the right side? Just to build something from absolutely nothing when everything's been taken from you and you don't know really what to do except just keep living, just like keep moving forward. And it's not a perfectly straight line, but it is a symbol of rebirth. It is a symbol of, we have to just keep moving forward. We have to keep living, because if we stop now, our whole existence is going to die. And I'm grateful for my ancestors who did not die, who decided to keep living, because if they didn't, I wouldn't be here. So really excited for you guys to just sit and look at that for a little bit. And so this is And They Dance. I'm just going to read it real quick. And the people moved their feet, moved their whole bodies to the melody of horns and stringed instruments, marimbas and drums. They danced to celebrate, to mourn. They danced as a way of worship, to offer thanks. Their bodies, a song under open sky and bright sun. Their bodies, a swaying testament to the beauty of creation. This is a little bit of reference from when I was just trying to construct that spread. I went back to my childhood, and there were so many masks on the wall and so many little artifacts and instruments from when my parents had gone to Africa. So many things that as I started researching for this book, I realized, oh, that's a Chakwe mask. That's from Togo. That's from Ghana. All these different places that I never learned about in school, but I'm just realizing just now, oh, these were Central West African tribes. I have to put them into the book. And so, there's just so many different things that I couldn't fit everything in there, but I tried to fit as much as I could. And so I'll give you a quick little rundown of how it went. I wanted to make a lush green because Africa is very lush. I did a quick speed sketch of, okay, I think there's going to be some people here and here, and I sent it to them to say, like, this is the direction. This is one of the ladies. Her name is Gaia. She has a hoo-hoo, which I think is from Cameroon, if I believe. Yes, that was some early research that I found this instrument called the hoo-hoo, which has this like bulb, and it's kind of like a flute. And then I worked on a lot of different adornment. I put in a lot of dances, a lot of instruments. There's so many dances, I can't even put it all together, but I put as much as I could into the scene to show that, for one, there were like scores of tribes that they kind of picked, like enslavers just grabbed from all over the place and picked so many different people and put them on these ships. And I wanted to kind of show, like, there's a lot of different cultures here, and it kind of explains in the book, a lot of the people who found themselves chained next to each other on these ships, they didn't know each other. They were from all over the place. Some of them, might have just, some of them might have, worshipped this way or mourned this way, or might have had a totally different religion, and they were all, instantly put together and forced to become a new people. And that's kind of why the book says that we are born on the water. This is not necessarily of Africa, of America. People were born on the water, and then we had to start new here in America. And so that's one of the issues that Black people deal with a lot in America. It's like this duality of, like, how African am I? How American am I? Sometimes it feels like you're in between, like, your whole life. And it's for that reason that, again, I'm just grateful that I tell them all the time, like, y'all picked me to illustrate this. Like, I'm so grateful that I can take something of such magnitude and put it into a book for the world. And like I always say, for me, I feel like it's a book for ages like 5 to 105. It's for everybody. So we'll get into that a little bit later, but that was pretty much my recap of the art that I've created and why I feel like, the visual image has so much power, and I'm going to keep making it. So let's talk about some stuff. Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nikkolas, and thanks again to those who are joining us online. So let's start with this image. You posted this yesterday, I think. You posted this image of Times Square. What was it like seeing your illustrations in such an iconic location?
I'm still pinching myself. Like, I can't believe, like, that's Times Square. Well, I did have, that was the second time that my art was in Times Square, and the first time was my portrait of George Floyd. And I still, every time I see something like that, I'm like, how did this happen? Like, I was designing, like, magical bathroom details in Disneyland a couple of years ago, and now it's this, and I don't know, it's just, it's amazing.
Can I ask what makes a bathroom magical?
Oh, there's pixie dust. There is, specifically for that one, there was Rapunzel's tower connected to it. So yeah, it was like she could come down at any time, and
Oh,
yeah, and
okay. That's a little invasive.
yeah, so yeah.
So let's talk a little bit more about the book.
Yeah.
Which of the illustrations in the book was the most difficult to conceive? Because this wasn't written by you. This was written by Nikole Hannah-Jones and Renée Watson. The illustrations, as I read through it, so clearly reflect great attention to the story being told in the poems. Can you walk us through the process of creating the art to best fit the text?
Yeah, that was. I would probably have to say the legacy slide with all of the great legends who you see standing in the water at the end. Well, the first thing is when I saw all of the entire poem that's on those 2 pages, I was thinking like, I need 10 pages. I need 10 pages to reflect all that they just said. But you have that one spread, and so I was, I immediately just thought, okay, well, I need to have some of the most iconic African American figures that have ever, walked this land, like front and center, just staring at you.
And name some of those people that you
So Frederick Douglass, Benjamin Banneker, Frederick Douglass, Crispus Attucks, Frederick Douglass. You have Billie Holiday. You have a Tuskegee Airman, it could be any Tuskegee Airman, and then you have like his plane going across. There is a modern day BLM activist that could be any BLM activist. You have Tommy Smith, who, with the iconic fist raise from the Olympics, and Shirley Chisholm, who is one of the greatest politicians in American history, who ran for president. There's so many that I couldn't really put all of them in there, but they start to kind of go back layer after layer, like Basquiat is kind of in the background. I just wanted to fill it as much as possible to say some amazing things happen, almost directly after slavery or in slavery. I mean, Frederick Douglass escaped slavery and then wrote a book about it. How do you do that? Taught himself how to write and read, unbelievable things, And it's just hard to kind of visualize all of that in the span of 2 pages, one spread. But it's that was a challenge. And then all the things that they did, literally constructing the U.S. Capitol. We don't talk about that a lot because I think it all should be talked about, but it doesn't get talked about. The statue at the top of at the U.S. Capitol that nobody knew how to put that together except an African, and they got the African that they needed, and they did it. And it's terrible that any of them were forced to do these things. But again, they were stolen from their land because they were good at what they do. And so just trying to visualize that entire scene of the fact that, like I said, Black lives built America. And just trying to get people to digest that one sentence, but through that amazing poem.
So I'd be remiss if I didn't address the elephant in the room that when you say Black lives built America and we say Black Lives Matter, there are a lot of people in this country right now who are attending school board meetings, who are upset that critical race theory is being taught in classrooms, and a lot of that concern stems from the original publication of the 1619 Project in the New York Times by Nikole Hannah-Jones and other colleagues. How do you respond to someone who says, that's not true, that's not our country, that's not who we are?
That's not. It's funny to hear people say that's not who we are when, if we're just going factually through history, year by year. That is who we are. That's who America has been. Now, the whole point of this, and the reason why I say this is one of the most patriotic books ever made, I feel, this 1619 Project book and Born on the Water, is because books like this are trying to hold America's feet to the fire, to say, like, if we're going to say, with liberty and justice for all, then we have to actually hold America to that. Like, if we're going to make kids say the Pledge of Allegiance every morning and sing all these songs and do all these things, and then talk to them about George Washington and leave out the people that he owned and all these other things, and Abraham Lincoln, and there's a whole chapter of things that I could say about Abraham Lincoln that I wasn't taught. These things happened. They just happened. So it's like, what are you omitting? And if you're omitting all of the amazing things that my ancestors did, but you're keeping all of the amazing things that your ancestors did, what does that say to a young black child, in school? Like, why can't we just tell the whole story? Like, just tell everything. Like, put it out there. Like, this happened.
So it's not about omitting history about George Washington or Abraham Lincoln. It's about adding a more robust vision of what has happened in our history.
Yeah, and like I'm literally not proposing that we go to kindergarten and tell the little kids that George Washington enslaved people. I'm not saying that. But like, can we talk about Central West Africa? Can we tell them that no, it wasn't workers it wasn't just like workers from Africa, like a lot of the textbooks say, that were here just happily working, there was more to that. Like, can we include like some very important details, like that should be, and books like this are getting to that, and I love that Born on the Water doesn't really sugarcoat a lot of things. It's just this happened. Like, let's talk about it, and let's look at the points where you can be proud about. If you're a little black kid, you can be proud about your ancestry. You can be proud about the people who became black people, who became African Americans, Well,
that's one thing I found really compelling about the book, is it starts and ends with a little black girl who is asked to do a report on her heritage. And I think for a lot of white students and people in this crowd, if you had that assignment when you were a kid, you go back and you look at your ancestors. But for a lot of black folks, they can only go back 3 generations, and they have no idea what came before that. And there's sort of a disconcerting element to that. So I think that part of the story is actually very hopeful for black kids who can say, you know what, I can't trace back after those 3 generations, but this idea that we were unique people who were born on that transition from West Africa to the United States is something powerful in and of itself.
It really is, and it's just, I don't know, when I first read the poems, I just got chills, because it was like, this is something that, I wish I had when I was a little kid. I wish I could have seen something like this that, that I could point to say, oh, this is how everything went down, and these are my ancestors. They actually did way more than the textbooks are giving credit for, and I can be proud of that. So.
Well, let me switch to the experience I had with my students. So for those of you in the audience, National Agenda is also a class of students in political science and communication and public policy. And I walked into my class this past Monday, just 2 days ago, with your book in hand, and I thought, why don't I just read this aloud to my students? Because I know, having a young child, that reading to people is really powerful, and particularly as a group, it sort of brings people together in a way. So I told my students, I was like, I'm sorry this is a little unorthodox, but I read it out loud. And first of all, I want to say just this, that
I love it.
Even college students still enjoy being read aloud to. My students confirmed that they enjoyed this. But after I read it aloud, I asked them if they'd ever been taught anything like what's in the book when they were in school. Most of them shook their heads no. And several even recalled assignments that they think of now as being somewhat problematic and even perhaps racist. And one student even said that he learned about the Tulsa race massacre from a show, Watchmen. He learned about the assassination of Fred Hampton from the movie you worked on, Judas and the Black Messiah. Neither of these events were taught to him throughout school. So what do you want adults to get out of this book?
Yeah, well, the first thing I try to tell all adults is that it's for you. Like, it's for every human being. I call it a picture book. I don't really call it a children's book. And it's really deep. Like, it's very deep. And so even if you don't have kids, like, you should get it. Not just because I illustrated it, but you should get it. It's amazing. And it's literally written in verse. Like, I did not hold back on any of my illustrations. Like, I didn't try to make anything kiddie, you know? I tell people, like, it's just as good as a coffee table book, you know, on anybody's table as it is, you know, a story time book. And I love that it was a story time book for your class. Like, I love that. It should be a story time book for every class.
Yeah.
Classes of all ages.
Yeah, it was a very cool experience. I'm going to skip over this next slide and go to, here are some various works of art that you've done. In an NPR interview last summer in the wake of George Floyd's death at the hands of a police officer, you said the piece on the far left there, right, has George Floyd staring directly at you with a little bit of concern in his eyes. I feel like he's questioning, what is going on? Why did this happen to me? I want my art to show the world that this was a human being who should still be living on this earth. You've also created illustrations of Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery. Why is it important for you to illustrate these people? And if you can also talk a little bit about the fact that for a lot of these portraits, you leave the paintings or pieces of art somewhat unfinished.
Well, first, I just feel like, I think this was part of, like I was saying, during the time when, you know, I can create any type of art, but if I see like terrible injustices that are taking place, like, I have to stop and, you know, try to in some way create a tribute, because I feel like they really help to kind of just show the humanity of people. And I'm hoping that somewhere along the way, like, if we can continue to get people to see the humanity in people who have been historically dehumanized, then we are going to get where we want to be. And so if my art can do that in any way, I'm gonna show it. And so already, like, my art is very sketchy. It's typically unfinished, but especially when there's when these very traumatic, violent moments with, you know, concerning a life that's been cut short, somebody who should still be here, I want to make the piece even that much more just kind of like almost chaotic in a way, but also just unfinished, to go right back to the fact that they should still be here. But there's a lot of times there's so much anger and frustration surrounding the moment. And for me, like, I'm literally just like going through it like everybody else, just grieving and trying to figure out why this happened. But for me, using this as art as therapy, which it started off as, that's how it is now for these pieces. I just want to, it's really a therapeutic thing for me. And it's so great that people now write me and say, like, I was able to cry about the situation. A lot of times families of the victims will contact me and say, like, I was able to cry about this in a way that I hadn't until I saw the art piece. Or sometimes it's conservative people who come from conservative families who say, I was able to talk about this to my conservative family in a way that I hadn't, or I was able to just share this I don't have all the words to say, and I want to be an ally, and I don't know what to say, but I was able to share the art. That's something about art where it's just like, it can say the words that you don't have, you know. And so I'm very, very grateful that the art can do that.
Well, and that's another question that I had from one of my students, Ben, asked, do you think your artwork has the ability to spark positive discourse and honest discussion with people on different sides of the political aisle? In other words, how can art enable people to be on somewhat of a level playing ground where we might be able to have a conversation that we might not be able to if I just say, hey, I endorse critical race theory, or I like the 1619 Project. But if we show an image like the one we just saw on the previous screen, oops, now I just moved up another one. Hang on.
Yeah.
I can go back now.
With George Floyd, yeah.
Yeah, so like how can art, separate from civil discourse and civil dialogue, which we spent a lot of time this semester talking about, how do we have these conversations? What's unique about art that can connect people?
Well, hopefully, if it's doing its job, then for me, I want my art to speak to humanity, and I want it to kind of showcase the humanity of people. Excuse me. So sorry, before I get my throat. And so, like the piece with Rosa, who was an immigrant at the border. Well, she was seeking asylum, and what I would say was like, can you just look at Rosa in the face and tell me that, like you've always said, that you would do anything for your child? Like she had like 3 kids. And whatever was behind her was so terrible that she would risk everything to come to the border of America and try to find a better life. And everybody says that they would do anything for their kid. And when you see this art piece of her, it's almost like you can't tell me anything else than yes, you would do anything. So then how can you turn around and say that, you know, this person deserves to have tear gas thrown in her face and deserves whatever is coming to her because she left her home? And so a lot of times I'm trying to just really show the humanity in people, and that's why a lot of times the portraits are looking at you right in the eyes to say, like, look at this person in the face. Like, tell me, you can't not tell me that this person is not human like you, like they are. And so a lot of times I feel like art has the power to just, like, you know, reach everyone in that way. And if you're honest with yourself, you know, you will see that. Like, I mean, you can stick to your political position all you want, but there's some things that, like, art is just gonna just cut through. So
Here's a water for you, by the way.
oh, thank you. Appreciate it.
Well, let me jump to this next slide. I don't know why this is not working. There we go. This is a photo by Dai Sagano. This is a photo that was taken at a George Floyd protest in San Jose. And what I find interesting is sometimes you take an existing photograph or a well-recognized figure and create something new out of it. And I mean, the similarities between that photo and your painting or your art is just so fascinating. But there is something different about it. You added sort of a different element to the artwork. So I was wondering if you can first explain why you chose this picture and sort of why you adapted the art to convey something slightly different.
Well, I felt like it was one of the best representations, encapsulations of all that was happening last summer. And because honestly, the majority of the protesting that was going on was peaceful. And at the time, I was living in Koreatown in Los Angeles, and I could literally hear the protests that were taking place. I also had like a baby who was just born, and so I'm not leaving my house. I have a newborn, and there's a pandemic, but I can literally hear. Well, first of all, I can see the cop cars like going by, and I can hear, everything that's happening. And I feel like that was a perfect representation of what was happening, because amidst all the peaceful protesting, there was also like an unbelievable overreach that I felt was happening with all these police departments that had millions of dollars of like SWAT gear and grenades and like all these SWAT trucks and all these things. And I was like, how can this happen? Like, why is this even happening? Like, there's literally hundreds of thousands of people with no homes in the streets, and y'all have millions of dollars to do this against people who are literally marching for Black lives or whatever was happening. It didn't make any sense. And so this piece was so powerful. But what I wanted to do was kind of have her holding up a mirror to say, like, do you see yourself? Like, I also wrote a poem called Reflect about what was happening, and just to say, like, do you see what you've become? Like, can you see what you've become? Like, it's ridiculous, and it should not ever be like this. And so, yeah, that was I think there's another one of those moments where it's like, I don't even know if it was a Sunday, but I was like, I had to make this as kind of like part of my Sunday sketch series, and kind of reflect what was happening in the moment.
Well, part of the reason I selected it was because our theme is reflecting America, and I
Perfect.
thought it was very interesting to think about, I think we're all, this past couple of years has been so hard for so many reasons, and I think we're all kind of wondering, what happens when we put that mirror up? Who do we see? Who are we as Americans in this, fairly long-term experiment of democracy? And, we continue to face struggles, and I liked the image of a mirror sort of demonstrating, like, okay, who are we?
And if we're honest with ourselves, we don't like what we see, especially when we look back to the 1700s, 1600s, which is why our textbooks look the way that they do.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's hard to look in the mirror sometimes, right?
So you can own it and help us move forward and be honest, or you can continue to hide it,
Well, I want to wrap up before we have the Q&A, and I'm going to ask, as I wrap up, my last question here. If people in our audience have questions, be ready to raise your hand, and one of our student mic marshals will motion you to one of these microphones by the stage. Please keep your masks on, as regulated in UD COVID policy for indoor campus buildings. And then if you're online, please consider dropping a question into that Q&A, and it could be asked here tonight. So I want to switch gears a little bit to this image, which I find very joyful. It's another image of yours. First of all, remind us about who this is, what this scene is in the popular children's show. What is this depicting? Does anyone recognize this
You know who that is?
image? Yeah.
Yeah, that's Mr. Rogers, who I put him in the list of, like, usually when I'm talking about the superheroes that I draw, like, Mr. Rogers is a superhero. And also Officer Clemens. But, like, Mr. Rogers did this on his show during a time when, there were certain racist white people who were literally pouring bleach into pools where Black kids were swimming. And, Mr. Rogers, like, here's Officer Clemens. He's a Black guy. I'm going to share a kiddie pool with him and show you all that Black people don't have cooties. And it's just like, thank you. Like, I don't know why you had to, it's sad that you had to do that, but that was a pretty cool moment on the show. And so I wanted to show that. He's awesome. And that was also one of the ones that was on, billboards last summer in Los Angeles. So that was pretty cool to just put that out there. And that was one of the ones that people liked the most, because
Yeah, so this was 1970.
Yeah,
something?
probably early 70s.
So there was an African-American man who played the police officer in Mr. Rogers' neighborhood, and it was a hot day, and so Mr. Rogers invited him to cool his feet off in the pool. And that wasn't that long ago, and it was pretty controversial at the time.
Yeah.
So I think some things that our students don't always understand is that change happens oftentimes very slowly. And I think what we're seeing now, when I mentioned things about the school board meetings and critical race theory, is that there are folks who are showing up who were not taught the history that you're suggesting some of our students and young people need to be taught, who resent that because it's not what they were taught. And, I've said this before, if we don't reckon with our history, we're bound to repeat it. I'm not the first person to say that. I'm not going to take credit for that. But I think that it really is important to understand the full picture of our history. Mm-hmm. So it's about time for audience Q&A. So I'll start first with someone from the audience. Does anyone have a question that they'd like to ask of the speaker? Thank you. I'm sorry, Sarah and Trey are going to be helping us out with the questions. Yeah, right over here. Let's start with you. Please come up to the microphone. Thank you.
I can't resist. I ask one every time. But hi, my name's Abby. Nice to have you. Thank you. So I'm from North Carolina, so I don't know how they got all of us Southerners up here to Delaware. But so I'm from Greensboro. It's a very, I don't know if you've heard of very rich civil rights history, a few HBCUs. It's a big centerpiece for that kind of thing, including the World War lunch counter, which had the historic sit-ins, started this whole thing. And so we have that lunch counter. It's a very, the International Civil Rights Museum. And now in the street, which they shut down all the time, and people are always walking around, there's a beautiful, Black Lives Matter mural that goes down the whole street. And it's this beautiful show of history. I think it's great. But of course, there's plenty of people in our city and surrounding it in all the rural areas that are very upset about that. They think, what are they writing in our streets? And it's this whole, it honestly makes me mad how angry it makes people. So I was just wondering if you ever had any piece of art specifically that made people very angry, and how that made you feel, how you're obviously trying to do so much really awesome stuff, and how that makes you feel to be responded to with that kind of hate in return.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would definitely say 2013, the piece that I created of Martin Luther King Jr. in a hoodie, which was, I think, so that was when Trayvon Martin's killer was found not guilty. There was a hoodie movement. And that piece, oh my goodness, it was tweeted by Ben Jones, and then I ended up going on CNN to talk about it. And it made it around the Fox News and other circles. And there's a group of people who only know of Dr. King as the I Have a Dream speech guy. And to them, it's oh, you're making Dr. King look like a thug, and why would you? They really don't even care about the piece. They really don't understand anything about Dr. King's legacy. They have no idea that he was arrested over 20 times and an amazing activist, a fiery activist. But if you're, that piece was just something that it infuriated a lot of people, because what they're really saying is they don't want their perfect image of America to change in any way, because they don't really want progress. And so it's sad, but it's that's just how it is. And so I love that artivism can kind of shake people in that way. I always say I want my art to kind of shake people and wake them up sometimes, or kind of paint a picture of what we could be, and be hopeful. But sometimes it has to just shake people. And so there's been numerous times after that where people have been upset by the art, but the Colin Kaepernick kneeling, and I end up getting blocked by Trump on Twitter, all that good stuff. Art like that again, people who don't want to change and don't really want progress will be very upset by art that talks about justice and equality. Go figure, justice for all is not a thing that they like to see.
Also retweeted by Rihanna, though.
Retweeted by...
And Michelle Obama.
Yes, I will take Rihanna retweet over a Trump block any day. Yes, all of them.
Can you take us back, though, to I mean, the image is striking. I hope that you all look it up. And Nikkolas's website is just nikkolas.com.
.art.
Dot,
Nikkolas.art.
.art, okay.
Yeah.
It's profound because we're accustomed to seeing Martin Luther King Jr. in a suit and a tie, and this image has him in a hoodie. And I mean, can you explain sort of, other than Trayvon Martin being the motivation for that, Trayvon Martin famously was wearing a hoodie, which was what made George Zimmerman feel that he was a threat to him.
Yeah.
What other message were you trying to send by putting this specific historical figure in that contemporary piece of clothing?
Yeah, it was really kind of just speaking to Dr. King's dream of like not wanting anybody to be judged for their outward appearance. And literally that's what happened. It was kind of like a litmus test to see like, what is your reaction when you see Dr. King in a hoodie? Is it negative? Like, did you understand his life at all? Like, do you realize why he was fighting? But yeah, that was kind of the point, and just it really, it did exactly what it was supposed to do. Yeah.
And I think though that for a lot of Americans, they're taught a certain history. There's a lot of patriotism and pride in who we are as Americans, and it's hard to look at images like that and sort of try and comprehend. Well, that's not who I thought Martin Luther King Jr. was.
There we go.
Oh, okay, thank you.
That's the one.
That's the one. And so
I literally changed nothing about his face. This is a photo from 1964, maybe. I literally only put a hoodie on him, and then kind of like add a little texture on top. One of the easiest Photoshop pieces that I've ever done, and maybe the most controversial.
So what do you say to someone who is disturbed by this image? Like, how do you encourage them to say, maybe look at it in a new light or in a new way? And instead of having this, I often talk with my students, this sort of visceral, emotional reaction that we have, like, that doesn't make sense, like, I don't want to see it. But art, I think, historically has always been like, why don't we look at it this way? Let's literally flip it on its head. Salvador Dali or Pablo Picasso, like, here's a totally new way of looking at this.
Yeah.
So what do you say to someone who says to you, like, I don't like that, I don't accept that? What do you encourage them, how do you encourage them to view it maybe in a different way?
I mean, part of it is just, I always want to ask them the question, like, do you realize that, I mean, the reason why Trayvon Martin is no longer alive partially is because he was walking through his own neighborhood with that hoodie on. And this like rent-a-cop guy who wanted to be a gunslinger hero ended up killing him. And if Mark Zuckerberg was wearing that same hoodie in that same neighborhood, he would never be shot and killed. Like, and so it's just, can we ask ourselves why do we continue to hold these stereotypes, especially of black men being dangerous and fearful, literally just because of their skin color, and why can't we literally understand Dr. King's dream, like, don't judge a book by its cover, by what they're wearing, by what skin they have on them, like any of that.
By the content of their character.
Yeah, and so we're gonna learn one day, I guess. We'll figure it out, but it's clearly still a challenge for people to wrap their minds around. I don't know.
Well, I'd like to invite again questions from our online audience. If you just go to the Q&A at the bottom of your Zoom window. But while I'm waiting for some of those questions to queue up here, let's take another question from the audience. Someone over on this side, perhaps. Oh, there is one on the screen. Thank you. Okay, what was the timetable for the George Floyd portrait? I'm curious how long it took to sit with the injustice of his murder before turning it into powerful art. If you could talk a little about your speed, what did you call it? Speed painting as well with this, I think that'd be really interesting.
Yeah, so for the George Floyd piece, I'm trying to think. I mean, for a lot of the art that I make that is like, dealing with very traumatic moments, a lot of them, I tell myself like 20 times, I'm not gonna make any art about this because I'm just literally like too hurt and too angry about what's happening. It was like that for Elijah McClain. It took a couple days before I even made anything. For the George Floyd one, I didn't even watch the whole video of his murder, and I still haven't seen the whole thing. But I think it was a good day or two or three of just like, I'm very, very upset. I'm not gonna do anything. But then I always go back to the computer and say, I gotta make something. I have to try to create some sort of tribute for this person. And then once I decide to do it, it's like, it takes about an hour or two of just like speed painting.
And explain what that speed painting process is.
So it's just like, I have a Wacom tablet and a pen and my laptop, and just literally, usually I have like a couple photo references of the person, and I try to make it look as much like the person as possible because actually a lot of times the families of the victims end up, reaching out and saying like, can we, like this painting has helped us, like can we put this in our home, like a Tatiana Jefferson's family or Chadwick Boseman. But it's just like, trying to be, honestly, like put all of that energy and anger and hurt into a very quick painting that, I'm just like, it's like drawn on an iPad pretty much. And after about an hour or two, usually I have something that I'm like, okay, this tells what I wanted to say. I was telling the students about how like I don't ever like have anything perfect where I'm like, this has to be perfect, and I need to get every little detail right. Like I just get to the point where I'm like, okay, people know I'm gonna get my point across with the way that it looks right now, and just like post it, and let it be in the world and do what it does. And then things happen where like Michelle Obama shares it, and I'm like, how did that, like, how? And yeah, and then just let people take it. And like I was saying, like even if they don't have the words to say, like just share it in whatever way that they would like to.
And I think that's what's kind of unique about art, just going off of that previous point about how is that different from like, let's engage in conversation, let's talk across differences. Sometimes you don't have to say anything at all. Mm-hmm. It's just, let's both look at this image together, let's take it in, and we don't have to have an opinion about it, we don't have to make a conclusion about it, we don't have to judge it, we can just sort of observe and take it in, right?
Yep.
Okay, let's take a question from the audience over, actually, we've got someone in the back here. If you want to come up to this microphone over here, thank you.
Hi, I'm Ava. I really appreciate your art because I feel like I get the sense that you make a lot of art for yourself and not for other people's judgment.
Yeah.
Could you touch on that and also how you use art for therapy?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. I guess it all kind of, both of those questions kind of blend and go back to that moment where I was, doing architecture as my day job, and then I would come home and just like, okay, I just have to make something for myself. Like I just need to make, anything. And especially during the time when I was going through a divorce, lowest point of my life, like, that was a moment where it's like, okay, I'm going to, like, artist therapy, it wasn't like just a conceptual thing. It was like, I need to make some art to help pull me out of this point, or else like I'm packing up and I'm moving back to Texas. Like my life as I know it is over. And so it really just became that idea of like, I'm just gonna create any anything, whatever I'm feeling, and just do a digital sketch and put it out there. And that's something that I encourage everyone to do who, even if you don't consider yourself an artist, like you are creative, like just throw some paint on the canvas, and there's something therapeutic about that. I don't know, it's just like, just make something, like put pen to paper or whatever, and just make something. And so it became that weekly, I'm gonna just make something, whatever I want. And it grew so much that I was like, I need to, for one, and I realized, okay, art is actually my passion. This is what I should be doing. But also, I need to quit my engineering architecture job and do this full time, which was a couple years ago. So, yeah, it's just, and again, I encourage everybody, just make some art, just do it. Like whatever it doesn't, that's the thing, like it doesn't have, and that's why digital painting helped me a lot, because I realized it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be, the best thing that I've ever seen. But if it comes from right here, then it's just like, people will connect with it, I feel like, and I think that's why it works for me, because it's just whatever I'm feeling. Even when I was doing the Born on the Water artwork, it's like, I'm gonna read these poems and I'm just gonna sketch whatever I'm feeling. And then a lot of the final pieces from the book ended up, looking very similar to the original sketches, because it's like, it's all for me, it's all a speed painting process, because I cannot sit in front of a computer for like 8 hours and do one piece. I can't do it. It's like the ADD or something, I don't know. Yep, thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from our Zoom audience? Yes. What is one goal that you have for your artwork?
One goal, well, I would say a major goal is that, honestly, that I would not have to make any more of that artwork. Like, it would be great if, like, I didn't have to make any more tributes of, people who were killed by the police or whatever, and didn't have to encourage people to fix the planet because it's being fixed, and it's not getting stalled in Washington, D.C. because of politics, or, all these types of things. Like it would be wonderful if...
So all those problems are solved. What art are you creating, do you think?
I would probably go back to just doing abstract stuff, like totally abstract. Like I do semi-abstract now, but you get that it has a message, that's something we're trying to fix. I think it would just be totally abstract. And it's kind of like, I was talking to Nikole Hannah-Jones on a Zoom presentation yesterday. She's basically saying, like, if I didn't have all this work that I had to do, I would, like, I would be doing something totally different, like interior design or something like that, where she just feels like she has to do the activism stuff, like, now. And I kind of feel that way too, like, it has to be this right now. It might just be abstract art in a perfect world.
Do you ever resent that you are sort of put in a position where this is what you have to do right now?
No, because it's just, at the end of the day, I realize, like, it's just so important. And obviously, it's not like in the next 10 years or 100 years, it's going to be a utopia, a perfect world. So, it's something I'll always do. But I feel like that's part of the beauty of it all, is realizing that, like, I have to keep, like, fighting this good fight. Like, I just have to keep going with it.
Well, so for those non-artists and non-activists and non-artivists in the audience, what are some ways you suggest that they might get involved if this is an issue that they're passionate about? Yeah,
and I think that's part of the beauty of the artivism that I do, is that, like, even, it's fine if you don't necessarily have this that you're doing day to day. Hold on, because here comes the coffee kid.
Thank goodness we have the water now. You're not used
Healthy,
to,
I promise.
you're not used to this dry
I know.
air.
I just love that the artivism, a lot of times it just helps direct people, and especially people who are like, you know, they might say that they don't have a ton of time, or like they're not gonna devote their whole every day to activism, but you can actually like, oh, this is an amazing art piece. And then in the comment, like I'll always add a comment underneath. A lot of times I'll say like, and you just saw this, but also you can sign your name to this petition if you click this link, or you can text justice to 55156, and you can contact your district attorney. You can help like take concrete steps to solve this problem. And it's like, you know, I think that's helpful too. Like, it doesn't have to be like, I'm gonna quit my job and become a full-time activist. I mean, that would be awesome if you wanted to do that. But you don't have to necessarily, you know. So I just love that artivism can be that, you know, kind of director for anyone, you know, who's not sure exactly what to do and may not have like, you know, a ton of energy to put into it, but it's like, okay, what can I do right now to make this change?
Well, I think you know what we've been hearing all semester through this year's program and previous year's programming is there are so many ways you can get engaged, no matter your ideology, your party, your interests, the policies that you care about, whether it's art or comedy or activism or journalism. There are so many ways that young people in particular can really make a difference in this world. All right, do we have one more question from over on this side? Would you mind? You can go over there, I guess, if you want. It's a little easier for you to get over to that microphone. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Gina. So you touched on your art being really personal and touching for you. In making that conscious decision of posting it on social media, which is full of people trying to criticize, how does the criticism feel to you, and like, does it get to you ever?
I mean, I feel like I'm kind of a debater in the sense that like when I started, like, especially even like with the MLK artwork and stuff, like, I was just like taking on all the comments and like firing back at like everyone. I don't do that as much, but at this point I'm like, the comments don't really get to me. It's just like, I know they're gonna be there. I mean, they're literally like typing them right now, regarding Born on the Water and 1619 Project. Like, it's happening right now. And I know it's gonna happen because, like I said, it's like there are sadly still a ton of people in this country who don't want to see progress, and they will vote for politicians that don't want to see progress in the way that I want to see progress. And the way that I want to see progress has to do with justice for all, like everyone. And so, you know, yeah, they always show up, but it's like, you know, can't really do much about it. But that clearly they are affected in some way by the artwork. And, you know, in that sense, I'm like, well, you know, in that sense, I feel like my art is done its job, but it's always gonna be there, like, kind of like punching you in the gut with the truth. So, you know, keep talking.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for that question. Well, I think we're going to wrap up here in a little bit, but I do want to point to some of the other initiatives that we're doing at the Center for Political Communication. One of them being, just making sure the right slide is up, speaking of different ways of being active or expressing your viewpoints. And Trey and Sarah, you can sit down if you like. I don't mean to keep you standing. Thank you for your assistance. We have been doing this audio essay contest since, I believe, 2017, and it's a great way for students to express their opinions about a different theme. Each year we have a different theme, and this year it's, why is everyone so angry, right? It just seems like everyone's so angry about everything. And we do have prizes for this is an audio essay contest. You can win prizes. The deadline is December 10th, so that's coming up pretty soon. Go to cpc.udel.edu/voices, and you'll find more information. It's a great opportunity to have your voice heard. It's also a great opportunity to have something you can put on your resume. And, who doesn't like some extra money in their pocket, right? So please consider submitting to that contest. I also want to ask people to be alert to an initiative we've been doing for a couple of years now on UD's campus, which is Free Intelligent Conversation. And this is an initiative where I have students out on the green, on Main Street, and other areas on campus holding signs that say Free Intelligent Conversation. And they're engaging with students, with people on the university campus, not about who you voted for or what your political ideology is or what your religious background is. It's just simple things like, what was the question that was at your table this evening? Do you remember? I'm trying to remember.
Like what political show?
Oh yeah, what political entertainment show influenced your understanding about politics? And the question at my table was, what did you want to be when you were little? What did you want to grow up to be? And these are conversations that help us tap into that humanity that you're talking about, where it's like we all have the same kinds of fears and hopes and worried about being embarrassed and whatever. It's like, we're all still, like I said, I read your book, which is going to be for sale after this event, signed copies out in the lobby. I think there's a child in all of us that wants to be read to and that wants to be heard and that wants to just be asked, like, what do you think? What do you care about? And so I'm doing a lot of these initiatives over the next year. Please, for those of you on campus and those of you on Zoom, if you are wandering around UD's campus, please be on the lookout for students asking these kinds of questions. And again, I will emphasize that the book is beautifully illustrated. It's profound. It's not something I ever read as a child, anything like anything I would have read as a child. I read it to my own daughter, who's 11, and it was a profound experience. And I know I've already put some books on reserve that I'm going to purchase for her school, and there's quite a few copies out there, so make sure you get out there early, get your copy. And this is the last of our speaker series this year. Next year will be our 12th season, which is pretty exciting. We will bring in lots more speakers from across the ideological spectrum, from all different walks of life, to give you an experience where you're hearing from people you might not have heard from in another situation. So I want to thank Nikkolas for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you all.
And thank you to all of you who are our loyal supporters coming to our speaker series, both in person and virtually. Have a wonderful rest of your 2021. Thank you.
Thank you.